Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 89. I am joined today by Jay Eastoe-Smith, the head of Academy Athletic Performance at Norwich City. Jay, how's things?
Yeah, really good, thank you. It's been a busy and slightly strange period, but I'm sure something that we've all learned from. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for coming on, mate. I really appreciate you giving up your time, and I know we've got some good discussions on some slightly different topics on your role today. So thanks for giving up your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's an honour, and especially following on from some of the fantastic guests that you've had. So I think it's a great job what you're doing in terms of connecting our industry across the world. So yeah, brilliant.
I appreciate that, mate. So Jay, kick us off. Let's go through your career so far. So go back to your education, and then I just mentioned your role. So just take us into what you're doing at Norwich.
Yes, I'm very much a Norfolk boy. So I was grown in a very much working class family. Grew up in Norfolk. I'd done my undergraduate sports science and the sport and exercise science degree locally. Mainly because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know whether I wanted to go into coaching. At the time, I'd had quite a lot of experience coaching different groups, whether it be disabled athletes in multiple sports, school sport, so PE lessons, after school sports clubs, or like actually isolated sport being football or cricket, which is another interest. So I was unsure where I wanted to go, and the degree that I chose to do, I knew the course tutor was quite an established coach and locally, and I thought that sort of aspect sort of led me towards that. Alongside that, I was sort of doing, like I've just explained really, I've done plenty of coaching. So I was coaching sort of 2-3 nights a week, playing football mostly twice a week, semi-professionally. And then played again competitive cricket and all sorts around that, as well as holding a job at in retail as well, which I think the lessons learned from that would be it's an unbelievable place to learn about dealing with people, both coaching and working in retail, and something that probably when we go to recruit people for our department now, it's a really, really key skill that someone might have. From there I went third year of my degree. I got contacted by a guy called Chris Lorcan, who's now at Northamptonshire County Cricket Club as the lead S&C coach. Excellent S&C coach, and to this day, probably the best that I'd worked with in that area. Invited me in to do 1 day a week, just to some shadow work. And luckily we had a mutual friend. It was at the time where the EPPP was going to start in the summer. So again, I was in the right place at the right time to finish my degree. And whilst out in Australia doing a bit of travelling, got asked to come back early and start a full-time internship. Like I said, at the time, it was just perfect timing. So maybe not the same sort of thing at the moment where it's really competitive to get into work placements and jobs. And it's very, very different back then. That was 2012. Since then, I'd done my full-time internship. About halfway through the season, I got offered a full-time job for the following season. I worked predominantly for the first 4 years with the under 9s to 16s, but also probably 2 to 3 days a week I would take either an under 18s or an under 23s pre-activation session, a warm-up, and then as well getting involved with sort of gym sessions and programming for injured athletes. So that was with Andy Johnson, who you've had on before. He was my line manager at the time, so he got me involved like every day, and that was a massive learning experience for me. And looking back, probably prepared me, not fully, but to a really good degree to then step up to the next role. I then moved up to have a go with the under 18s. I'd done that for a couple of years before moving on to working on the under 23s, and then working under a guy called Ross Hollingworth, who was our head of sports science and medicine. Another excellent practitioner. And then when he left, I then took his role. So as the head of head of Academy Athletic Performance, and that's where I'm at now. Learning masters at St Mary's University in strength and conditioning with John Goodwin and Dan Clever, joint leaders of that course, which again, being exposed to those guys on a frequent basis was an unbelievable opportunity to learn and develop. And yeah, that's where I'm at today.
Awesome. And I actually, I didn't tell you this, but I reached out to Andy Johnson just to get any feedback from him and see if he got any questions. So I'll put them to you in a little bit and see what you've got to say. But he's not gone too harsh on you, to be fair.
I hope he's kind.
He has been very kind. But one thing I was going to ask, Jay, in terms of like the structure at the academy now, so do you want to take us through the sort of bodies and the people that are involved and how the structure of the academy looks?
Yeah, so the academy has, I was trying to work out this morning, about 38 full-time members of staff, which is a huge operation. We also have part-time coaches that come in, part-time physios that help us run our schoolboy program and cover games on Sundays. And then more sort of focusing towards sports science and medicine. There's currently myself plus 3 other full-time members of staff working in our sports science department. In the medical department, we also have 4 full-time physios. So we have 2 predominantly working with the foundation phase, so under 9s to foundation phase and youth development phase, so under 9s to under 16s. We have 1 full-time at under 18s and under 23s. But what I was really keen on doing when I took this role was ensuring that everyone worked across every department, every age group, because they have their own unique challenges. So what I'm really big on is when we're doing staff planners and rotas, it's all about making sure that everyone's getting exposure to different age groups throughout a week. The reason we do it is because, like I said, the unique challenges, it might challenge sort of coaching skills, it might challenge communication, and it doesn't allow a member of staff to work in like just by themselves. So I think it's really good for our more junior members of staff, which I'll touch on in a moment, to get exposure to working with more senior members of staff and seeing the way that they would coach things, but also it allows the more senior members of staff to probably take a bit more of the creative side from our younger, more inexperienced staff, because they have some unbelievable ideas and coaching in a completely different way. So it's trying to help educate the more junior members of staff and expose them at the top end as well. So they might be taking under 23s, 18 sessions, whether it's rehab, pre-activation, sometimes warm-up, sometimes conditioning, gym sessions, everything, just to try and really challenge their skill set and ensure they develop into an all-rounded practitioner. I know we spoke before on the phone about the sort of makeup of that department, so I think it's worth saying in the time that I've been at Norwich City, we've had lots of sort of staff changes in our department. And sort of when I took the role, we had a very, an even bigger change in staff, where lots of people had gone to different places, which is probably why I got my role, if I'm completely honest. But we had the ability to actually develop the department into something that it is today, where we now have 2 members of staff in our department that are full-time that came through work placements with us. And they've been a massive success story really for the academy. So over the years, we've taken in work placement students every year from a number of different universities. And I guess the thing when we're recruiting those members of staff is looking for a certain personality that would fit within our department. So I believe that the 4 full-time members of staff in my department are completely different personalities, and I would say that they all have a really unique selling point. So whether it be as an S&C coach, as someone that's an unbelievable communicator with a coach and is very, very good at getting involved within that multidisciplinary team. It might be someone that has an unbelievable knowledge on nutrition and gives loads of value there, especially when we're trying to work with the club's nutritionist and making sure we've got a joined up approach that way. And someone that's really good with data and project development almost. And that, I guess that's where we're at the moment. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. And then in terms of, I know we spoke off air before we started recording about the success of the academy and some of the players that have come through. And I know there's a number of them now in the first team, regularly, like got a first team spot. But I know you talked about someone in particular when we were on the phone. And do you want to just touch on some of the successes that you guys have had, and also the reasons you feel that they're able to be successful?
Yeah, of course. I think the big thing to remember is, sorry, that's gone now. The big thing to remember is it's probably the players themselves that we have to give credit to, because um, those that don't have the ability or the skill set don't make it, unfortunately, at a certain level. Um, so people that, like, we'll talk about in a moment, like Todd Cantwell, for example, had a real unique skill set and was outstanding technically. We've had Jamal Lewis, who's outstanding physically. Max Aaron's exactly the same. And to play as fullbacks or wing backs in the Premier League, I think it's a non-negotiable. The way the game's changing is, like, our role is to make sure that the players that we're putting in front of the first team can not just cope but excel at that level. So the next right back and the next left back have to be better than Max and better than Jamal if they're still at the football club to take their place in either technical or a physical way, maybe both. I think the second thing to that would be the successes came when we've had a change at the top of the organisation. So with Stuart Webber being involved and coming into the football club, I know it's biased, but I'd suggest he's probably one of the best in the world currently in his role, and gets lots of praise around how he's changed the sort of environment at Norwich City, and bringing in a young head coach like Daniel Farker, who had a background at Dortmund's academy and was sort of had a proven track record of taking players from younger age groups, getting them into their first team. That's been probably the biggest switch, and he's allowed our players to develop and go through the system, whereas probably in the past that didn't happen. So I'd say they're the two biggest things. But yeah, I guess when you're looking at attributes, I would suggest that everyone has to have an outstanding attribute to make it to the first team level, because there has to be that wow factor when they first step foot on the grass in front of the manager or the head coach. Because if not, that journey becomes quite a short journey. Sometimes they don't step foot out in front of the manager straight away. Sometimes it's on loan. So we have a really, really good loan program, in which is sort of headed up by Stuart Webber again, and Neil Adams, who's an ex-professional at our football club, extremely successful in his playing days, and then led us to an FA Youth Cup winners spot in 2012-13, which was unheard of, and then was manager of our football club as well. And he's our loans manager and really heavily involved in that. And that's been really successful. So people like Todd Cantwell, who didn't go straight into the first team, went out on loan, had a really successful period out there. Both Jacob and Josh Murphy went out on loan and developed their skill set that they currently had. And they probably had to develop in probably psychosocial ways that maybe we couldn't give them without providing them first team football. So in the academy, maybe the limitations there were that they didn't get exposed to the pressures of winning games and being consistent in training to get a starting position. And sometimes that's not the case in academy football, because you carry smaller groups of players. So I think that was really, really, that's an important thing. I thought about this, and maybe even the geographical impact of Norwich City Football Club. So we have young players, and I would suggest if you're going through an academy in either the Northwest, where you're surrounded by big cities and lots of distractions, we don't have that here. The biggest distraction is probably chickens and hens waking up in the morning, which, yeah, each to their own. But no, in all seriousness, I think it builds a certain robustness in our players, because they're very isolated. Many of them, because our catchment area is so small, when we get to the age where we can recruit nationally, we do. And they live miles away from home, so they have to develop a certain robustness that way. Again, they don't have that sort of social interaction with friends and family, so it probably keeps a bit more focus on the job ahead in terms of turning up and doing your job and doing it to a really, really high standard. Obviously, the outcome of that is hopefully better performance and more consistency. And yeah, I guess touching on that point again would just be sort of less distractions. So yes, Norwich is a city. It's quite a small city. There are bright lights and nightclubs and stuff, but the club is a massive focal point within our local area. Everyone seems to know everyone, so it's one of them things that probably if they do go out on a Saturday night and misbehave, then it's with us before they get in on the Monday morning. So obviously we encourage people to relax away from football and enjoy themselves, but I think we certainly instill a certain amount of discipline, and the area itself sort of guides that. And then I guess, yeah, the support staff. So I guess for Todd's journey, if you're looking at Todd Cantwell, he joined us at under 10s. The change in staff and the sort of academy environment has been massive over the time that he would have been with us. He would have worked with probably anywhere between 50 to 100 different coaches and support staff across that period. He would have worked with 4 academy managers. There would have been 4 different managers. So the academy's coaching philosophy and coaching program would have changed within that. So as a technical player, when you're playing in real tight areas, so we had a focus for a few years of staying on the ball. Now for Todd, he really excelled in that area. And then when the philosophy sort of changed for the next academy manager and the next manager, when it becomes sort of bigger areas and it was more about sort of patterns of play and more of an individualized approach to sort of developing tactical understanding and technical attributes, then probably that's where Todd would have got questioned a little bit more, because physically he wasn't as developed as other people, so maybe didn't have as much of a positive impact on the session. But then, yeah, it then leads back to that point that probably the hidden fact with Todd is that to this day, he's still our record holder at every age group for the change of direction speed test that we use in the academy. So although he was technically the best player, he was the smallest under 14, 15, 16-year-old that I've ever seen, but he still had an unbelievable physical attribute. And our academy's philosophy was all, which I think we're going to touch on later, but was all around multi-directional athleticism. And that came in from 2012 when we first started, and it's still present in our programming, and it's still the main thing that drives our program today. So yeah, I think that answers most of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great to have an actual example of someone that's come through the system and the sort of battles they've been through and their journey, but also you as a practitioner as well, because I know you've touched on their location for players and it being quieter and not being the big attractions of big cities and all the rest of it. But you as a practitioner as well, you mentioned there about being at one club, but you've also mentioned about, and I know you used Todd Cantwell as an example, but I'm sure you've probably crossed over with a high number of coaches as well. So, and we've talked on this very podcast about exposing yourselves to different clubs and going into different roles and working with different people. You've done that at the same club. So what have been some of the benefits of staying at one club?
Well, I think it's been, I don't know, probably when you start at a club, you tend to start stereotypically at the bottom of the football club and the bottom of the organisation in terms of the most junior member of staff. And over time you develop and you get promotions, hopefully, and whatever. And that's sort of been the way it's been for me. But you get challenged in so many different ways, and you get exposed to so many different people that have different philosophies on staff, although they're still working towards the club's main goals, that I think it really challenges your personal philosophy at each step and every day, because you've got so many different ideas going on. Then the next people come in and they've got slightly different idea. And I think probably the end product is that you are you've tested your philosophy and tried it more robustly than if you were going to go to different organizations, because you have to adapt and change. I still have to adapt and change. But I think we've had, like I said, we've had a consistent message now of wanting to develop the best multi-directional athletes that we can, that are capable of playing international football and for our first team, since 2012. So probably there's a consistent message and framework that you work under. But again, yeah, like you said, and we touched on it in the last bit, I worked under 4 academy managers, each very, very different in their own right, but each extremely successful in their own right. With that comes massive switches at times in playing philosophies, in the way that they want their sports science and medical department to integrate with different departments. And yeah, I guess sort of the role that you play under different academy managers varies massively, and yeah, you get challenged in so many different ways. I guess it's the same at different football clubs, but again, I still think I would have worked under. I tried to work out again about 100. Well, would have worked with either 100 to 150 different members of academy staff, whether that be analysts, player care staff, recruitment staff, coaching staff, medical staff, psychologists, nutritionists. I've worked under 3 excellent head of performances for the first team. We've had 3 head of sports science and medicines in the academy. Again, sort of, it really challenges your way of thinking. Each person's got an unbelievable skill set. That's why they're in the building. They have some unbelievable knowledge, and I guess you have to be open to all of those people and take what you can from them. I think everyone says the best coaches are best thieves. I think it's across the board. It's not just coaches. It's like, if you know that you want to develop in a certain area. So for example, if I'm now in my role and I didn't have knowledge of a medical department and how a medical department can run and what they're dealing with and challenges they're dealing with on a daily basis, then how am I expected to lead on their department? So I guess, yeah, it's to take yourself out your comfort zone and challenge yourself to learn and develop alongside your other colleagues. But also the beauty of that is that you're in a consistent environment where you've already developed relationships with other people, so it's quite a safe place to learn. So maybe the learning process is slightly easier. And yeah, if things wrong and try different things, then it doesn't matter too much if you get it wrong, because relationships are pretty strong. I guess, yeah. Looking sort of at the head of performances that I've worked with, I was thinking about sort of their background. So our current head of performance, Chris Domagala, comes from Germany. He was previously had a medical background. He was ex-Oxford educated. Now that is so different to where I started, where we had a very so Chris Lorkin was and Mike Watts that I started with. They worked with Paul Lambert. They were excellent S&C coaches, educated in the UK, had done all the UK education, masters in the UK. Now there's two completely different styles there, and I guess probably it's made me more of a rounded practitioner, being exposed to each of those, because they're all excellent in their own right as well. So yeah, but I appreciate that some people do have to move on and develop elsewhere and challenge themselves elsewhere because maybe promotions don't happen, and other factors affect that as well. So
yeah, I think that's a great point, because like I say, on this very podcast with a lot of people, we've spoke about exposing yourself to different philosophies, different game models, and you've essentially done that at one club. So I don't necessarily think it's about moving, is it? It's about getting that exposure. And I think it ties quite nicely now into, I'm going to chuck one of Andy's questions at you, because he said about speaking to you about how your thinking towards youth development has progressed through your career. So that you can tie that in with obviously the different people you've worked under, but also tie it in with your philosophy, because I know we can talk about the department and the club's philosophy, but your philosophy as well, how that has progressed through your career.
My philosophy has progressed from being extremely safe when I was younger and sort of vague, and I think it probably now where I can be, or where I'm standing today, is that I've got a lot stronger belief in developing athletes that are robust. So I'll be careful about using the word strong, because I think people can sort of take that in the wrong way. But yeah, really robust to the demands of the game. So for example, my thing used to be, and I think everyone gets apprehensive, or would have been at some point in their career, apprehensive around speed training for team-based athletes, especially in quite a tough physical environment where you may be training for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 hours a week, covering 30,000 meters a week. But for example, last year we done a 12-week in-season resisted sprint program. Obviously, we sprint twice a week, and sprinting's not. I'm not saying, oh, we're just going to get to 90%. Everyone has to get to 95%. Obviously, there's caveats to that, but I think that's probably where my philosophy's changed, is where I'm a bit braver now. I do like guys lifting heavy in the gym, but I do also believe that there's loads of different ways to be strong. I think periodization is huge. So working with coaches is massive, and that's probably where I've got more experience now of, like, training volume and intensity used to not scare me too much, but you'd be sort of like, okay, safe in match day performance. But I think you can do both, and I think you build a certain robustness if you get your periodization right. So for example, if you, for match day -4 and match day -3, we're working in quite big volumes and have quite high intensities. You can do that if you get your match day -2 and match day -1 correct. So it's then not being afraid of that, and actually, you know what, yeah, we're going to develop that, because our main aim is about developing a footballer. So if the coach needs to work 2 big days around developing that player technically, tactically, and we go slightly over volume, our targets of training volume, then so be it. But then hopefully where I've developed good relationships, we tend to then taper even further on the Thursday and the Friday if we've got a game on the Saturday. So I think, yeah, probably not being scared of them end ranges, because to improve performance and for people to become more robust, you have to increase, or you have to push boundaries. You have to challenge players to keep people engaged. You have to challenge players. So from my experience in the last few years, the hardest sessions, whether it be me leading it in the gym, so when we're working on like low reps but real high intensity work in the gym, players go out of there and they're buzzing, because they feel like they are improving and they can see the improvement, and the sort of psychological aspect of really pushing yourself is a pretty good feeling. And I guess they get that more frequently from me now, because I'm confident enough to do it more frequently. So again, the lads we have races in the middle of the week, and it's nothing scientific. It is literally get on the line. When I say go, get past that as soon as you can, and you're getting lads that are over 10 meters a second sprinting. If I tell someone to stand there, right, just build yourself up, stride out. Obviously you have to prepare them properly to do that. I think, yeah, the boys just love competition. So yeah, in terms of working with, like, my philosophy around the way that I train athletes would be, yeah, it's developed massively because I've learnt more. When I was younger, I didn't have the experience, didn't have the knowledge. Whereas the more knowledge you get, you fine tune stuff. Probably when I worked with AJ, when I was a young pup, he guided me a lot, and I learnt loads from him. And I'll steal loads of his ideas. I still use them today. But also, he's a good friend of mine now, so we still talk and challenge each other that way. So it's it's great, and hopefully, from my learning over the years so far, I know I'm still pretty young, but hopefully that then is filtered down to the younger staff that I work with, and I really allow them to try stuff. And yes, we have a framework that we work from, because I think it's really important to have structure. And if you don't have structure, you can't necessarily hit targets, or you can't back yourself to hit targets and KPIs. But within that framework, there has to be the ability for an athlete, a member of staff, to be artistic and try different stuff and coach in their way, because if not, you build robots, and a robot in a meeting where they're challenged probably would break down a little bit, because they'd be sort of one-dimensional. Whereas someone that sort of thinks about why they're doing something and doing something in a slightly different way, as long as you've got a strong rationale for it, then why not? So there's probably two answers to that. Working with athletes, I've developed my philosophy more through experience and whatever. But then now, with the way that I work with people, especially those that are sort of more junior within our department, I think I deal way better with them now because of my learning experience as well, I guess.
No, definitely. I think there's some great points in there, and the sort of lessons that have come from more experience. I think that everyone's got to go through that, haven't they? Like you say, we've all got to be put under a bit of pressure and given that license to be a little bit creative with what we do, but at the same time, we've got a job to do, we've got a program to stick to, and all the rest of it. So there's a balance there, but that also comes down to the culture at the club, doesn't it, and the environment that you guys are in. So, and I know we spoke about it on the phone, but do you want to touch on, take that into the sort of department philosophy, but also that culture and environment at the club where we can tie into the trust of one another, and working with other staff members as well?
Okay, yeah. So I think probably when we spoke on the phone about what's probably unique about our football club is we do truly have what you class as a one club approach. Maybe that's due to resource, because we're not like a massive European powerhouse. But with our resource, I think we use it particularly well because the whole club works together. And giving a bit of detail to that would be, so for example, a working example would be the sports science department. I have two line managers, which would be the academy manager and the head of performance for the first team. The academy manager will probably do my appraisal work, but where the real work goes on is between myself and Chris Domagala. And I guess our job is to make sure that, in its rawest form, is to make sure that our development model at the younger age group, or the younger age groups, when we're working with those guys in the academy, is fitting enough to develop the next Todd Cantwell and the next Max Aarons and Jamal Lewis. So Chris has a big part in sort of overseeing that. Although I'll lead on it on a daily basis, it is communication between myself and Chris and the other guys as well in the first team. So we have some unbelievable staff working there. Lots of what they do gets filtered down to us via good relationships. It's sort of driven from the sporting director that I spoke about earlier, Stuart Webber, and the academy manager. If we're not working in that way, we'll get challenged on it, because the club believes it's the right way to go. A working example of that was, we had a member of staff leave last year, and Chris asked me to step up to the first team, so I worked with the first team all year, as well as doing my academy role. That's the beauty with it, because you can fit in that team seamlessly and not affect the culture within the first team or the academy negatively if you have to chop and change. And the other way around, we had a member of staff who came to work part-time with the under 18s as well, so done a lot of the grass-based work, who at the time was our data data analyst for the first team. So we were pretty much in charge of all of our GPS analysis. Qualified S&C coach, excellent practitioner on the grass, but his main role in the first team was GPS. So we've had it both ways. One stepped up, one's gone down, but still maintained their roles in their current sort of department. Yeah, I guess it sounds like the perfect thing, but it is, I guess, the academy and the first team still have their own agenda. So academy is all about developing a player. First team is all about performance on a match day, and they need to win. And so I'm not going to try and pretend that it's like a daily, I'm in their office, right? Oh, how's things going? Having a coffee, whatever. We help when we need each other, and we also appreciate our boundaries as well. And that is sort of got done through me being the focal point for the academy when there's crossover. And then the other way inclined would be Chris being the person that comes into the academy and would sort of challenge us that way as well. So yeah, sorry if you could just repeat the second part of the question. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think the other thing to tie in with that is, I think there'll be a lot of practitioners that will be in similar positions, but and I know there's a lot of clubs out there where first team and academy will be very separate, and they won't be able to cross over. And I understand completely what you're saying is that your sole role at the moment is the academy, but you're able to adapt to first team, and people are able to flip between the two. But I think the big thing with that is the trust, isn't it? The trust and the sort of buy-in from practitioners as well, because for Chris to reach down to you and be comfortable enough to just drop you into that first team setting and deal with the demands of that first team and understand what's going on, there has to be an element of trust there. And the same for him to come down to academy level. So what do you think some important factors are in building trust? And we've spoke about this a lot again on the podcast, but for you personally, where do you think you've built that trust with practitioners?
I think it's just the knowledge of we all have one common goal, no matter where you work, what within the football club. It's all about performance of a player, really, each individual player. So, for example, my main role is to ensure that the transition of a player from academy to first team happens, and it doesn't just happen, but it's efficient and it's effective. And that's exactly the same for every single coach in the academy. Whether it be at under nines, because they still play a part of that at the level to get the players to the under 10s and so on and so on. So I think having that knowledge of each other's common goals is really, really important. I think probably knowledge that we all have a unique skill set and that we can all help each other. I know that probably 90% of the coaches that I've worked with in the academy want to work with an older age group, or would like to be a first team coach or a manager or a youth team coach or a under 23s coach. And I know I can help them in terms of understanding the stuff that happens at the next level. So, for example, if they've had no exposure to GPS data before and they're working with a youth development phase, but they want to be a youth team coach, I think that you can start to help educate them in a way which is really user-friendly, which is a really human way to do it. It's not forcing it upon them. It's like, okay, look, have you ever seen this? Or like sharing data across different age groups. And then also, it's being a really good listener and wanting to learn from, pardon me, them as well. Probably some of my biggest learning comes from some of the coaches I've worked with. So one of them's now at Ipswich's first team coach, which is controversial as he played and worked for Norwich, but a really good friend of mine, Matt Gill. his skill set was so broad, like working with the way he communicated with players, and he was so consistent on a daily basis, whether the team were up or down. I think, yeah, that's huge. And you don't have to be friends with people. And I know I said with friends, but you don't have to be friends with people, but you need to appreciate what each other bring to the party. And I think if you, in your multidisciplinary team or in your coaching team, whatever it is, so if I'm standing on the grass with the assistant coach, the lead coach, and me, I know my skill set can help enhance the session. I know the other two beside me can help enhance the session. And that's our job, to make sure that every time we go out to step foot on the grass, even if it's like subtle changes of area size or certain demands put on the players through rules, if that means that we get a certain outcome that is going to help develop a player, then that's where we've got to try and test it. When things work, usually you go, oh, tell you what, that's really good. What about if we do it this way next time? Then you got them on board straight away. And I think over time, probably I'm lucky, I've worked at the same football club for a long time. So I've built trust and relationships through over time, where probably some of the stuff that we've done has been deemed successful, and players have developed and gone to the next level. And people then will look at you as being more of a senior figure, and yeah, but he's worked with this player and he's helped him get faster. So they're like, oh yeah, he's pretty good. But I also think our biggest role as sports scientists is just sort of immersify. I think we spoke on the phone about like immersifying yourself within their team and really being part of that. Because if you just sit on the outside all the time and just dip in with your GPS data and it's just numbers and whatever, then you're only going to have a certain amount of effectiveness. So in your multidisciplinary team meetings, it's like we've got to the point now where on a daily basis, I'd like to see myself as being part of the coaching team on a daily basis. And yeah, I do lead the sports science and medical department, but I think on a daily basis, my job is part of the coaching team. And that's in its rawest form is I will never coach technique, but me and the coach will work together to plan the week. And there'll be 3 or 4 sessions a week where we'll do some sort of passing pattern or technical drill within a warm-up that is going to be a passage of play that we'd like to replicate in the game, and then in the training session that's to follow. Now, my job is to try and get the physical outcomes that I require from that passing drill. So it might be over a bigger area if we've got a really extensive day, and we're going to go and sprint after. Or if we're looking at trying to get lots of explosive distance or accelerations, decelerations, lots of change of direction in the session, maybe we make it tighter and increase the intensity and the demands on the player that way. So I think for me, that's effective. That's a really effective way to work. And that doesn't happen overnight. I think you have to, again, I've not been to a new football club where I've tried to develop that, but I think it takes time, and it takes getting things wrong. We've done it some day and it's been like, all right, stop it here, because it's not good. But it's yeah, I guess what it does do is it shows a player that no matter if you're the assistant coach, the lead coach, the sports scientist, you are all singing off the same hymn sheet and you've got a clear message and you're working together. So discipline happens as like a given. Discipline's a given because you know you've got 3 people that are doing this for a specific reason. I think the coach then ends up coming into my gym sessions and sometimes takes part. He's an ex-professional and he loves it. And he wants to challenge players psychologically in certain sessions. Now, my input to that can be, right, okay, we're going to push them to certain boundaries, but safely. So it's like managing risk. And one person trying to manage risk by themselves is really difficult because they might not have the knowledge of certain people's thresholds. And my input can be really, really valuable there. And they know that. And that's not by me telling them that. It's because we try it and test it on a daily basis.
It's different eyes and different skill sets, isn't it? And everyone's, like you said, when you stood around the pitch with technical coaches or physios or medical guys like an S&C in sports science, everyone's working, like you just said it, and I think you summed it up really nicely, that everyone's working towards the same outcome. But you have to have that relationship to be able to trust other people, other practitioners, for them to have an impact. And I think it is just that, isn't it? And I think the clubs that don't work as well, there's either trust issues or, like you said, people don't understand other people's roles or skill sets quite as much. And that's where they're going to hold back on reaching out to that person. But when you get that and you can work cohesively as that team, that's when you can all pull together, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not always been the case. There's been times in my relatively short journey so far where you have to break down the stereotype of a sports scientist or an S&C coach, because believe it or not, people that aren't working within a sports science or medical department really don't grasp what we do necessarily. They think you're just there to make people quicker and stronger, and yes, that is a massive part of our role. But actually, like, that's when you only get maybe 2 gym sessions a week or whatever you get in, the rest of your time is spent with that person, and it's trying to make the training week, where most of the work's done, is trying to make the training week as optimal as possible for development and performance. Now, to break down them stereotypes, I guess you have to take yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, get involved, and challenge each other on a daily basis. So I've worked with one of the coaches I work with at the moment, Greg Crane. I first started in 2012 with him, and he was a part-time coach. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that he goes, "Oh, just don't get sports science. I'm not having it. I'm not having it." So that's what people. I'm sure people are still working with that now, but I'd say today, so me and him are probably the consistent members of staff that have gone through different age groups and still at the football club. To this day now, I'm sure he has questions and stuff about it, but he knows and trusts us, and he will utilize us in the way that he wants to, frequently now. And I mean, this is like just part of practice. So in an MDT, we pay the sports scientist that's part of that MDT and the medical member of staff that's part of that MDT, has their role to play within planning and reviewing and really developing their own program. So like that's I think probably what people face on a daily basis. Well, yeah, I just don't get it. Sports science don't do this, blah 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 blah. And it's the old stereotype of you injured him. No, I didn't injure him. I didn't injure him. But we can stop him from getting injured, and we can improve performance if we work in potentially slightly different ways. But it's how you communicate that across. And there's a bit of a joke. If you're good at staff football as well, you tend to get a bit of a buy-in, I think. So yeah, that's helped. Well, I'm not saying I'm good, but we've destroyed the first team this year at staff football. So that's been a big buy-in.
I think the 2 key points, mate, are be good in staff games, and as soon as you get any sort of coach to take part in a gym session, you're on to a winner.
Oh yeah, it's it's brilliant because the players, as much as we as practitioners lead our program, having a coach in the gym is so valuable, because they make decisions on who plays and who doesn't play. Now, as soon as a player sees that, it might be 5 or 10% increase in performance, and that is what we're searching for ultimately. Like, we are trying, like I said earlier, we're trying to push boundaries and we're trying to challenge them end ranges. And like, our philosophy at Norwich City Football Club is all geared towards performance and the transition of an academy player to first team. So them things it's unbelievable the amount of or how easy it is to sort of develop a really good hard-working environment in the gym. Like, the boys step foot in the gym and they know they're going to have a tough session, and they know the standard of work. So whether it's quality of movement or people spotting each other when we're working, or coaching each other, it happens, and it happens even more when the coach is there. So I'd like to actually, I think the coaches need a big pat on the back for those that are engaging in that way, because they've probably helped enhance what we're doing at Norwich City Football Club, where maybe it doesn't happen across the country. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that is a real. I was being a bit using it as a bit of a joke, but I think that is a really important point as well, because that ties in with everything that you've spoke about in terms of people working together, appreciating each other's role, understanding what we can do for each other. It all ties in, doesn't it? And that's an actual practical example of a coach completely understanding it and respecting the fact that there is good work going on there, and if they're going to get involved in it as well, they see the benefit as well, don't they? So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Jay, because we've gone, I promised you a certain amount of time, we've gone over it, so I don't want to chip into your day too much, but I was going to talk to you about CPD, because we spoke to quite a lot of coaches down your way in your part of the country, and the common sort of thing that comes back is that they struggle with reaching out and building a network, because there's not too many clubs down that way. So how, and it's very different to where we are in terms of the Northwest. We're surrounded by clubs, surrounded by practitioners. But how do you find CPD networking, and then what's the club's approach to it as well?
We find it, I spoke to you on the phone, we find it particularly difficult. I think for probably two reasons, really. Geographically, we don't have many events near us, so probably the closest would be London. We don't have that many clubs near us. We're a one club county. We are probably the closest club is Ipswich, but that's still an hour and a bit drive. Then we have Cambridge, Peterborough, Colchester, and not many opportunities to attend CPD events in our area. Whereas London area, Northwest is absolutely thriving. Midlands is thriving. So yes, it's only a short journey, but for a member of our staff to go away they have to go overnight the night before, maybe stay overnight the night after, and I guess resource as well. So again, I spoke about a couple of times. It's not an excuse at all, but we can't afford all the time to have two members of staff away. So for example, if it could be a 2-day conference. Very often, if we're in season and we've got a really busy weekend, with all the best will in the world, sometimes we can't afford to be losing two members of staff. Because like I said, when we're trying to run our program and everyone working across different phases, it's brilliant, but it means that we're pretty stretched. So I guess our approach to that is we've got a formal internal CPD program. So I think it's successful. It has been successful because one thing it does is empowers every single member of staff in your department, because we're all on a level playing field. We always challenging current practice within our organisation. It teaches people to be up to date with current literature in their chosen topic. And it also involves like work placement students. So I spoke about it earlier, and it's our duty when they come into our building to develop them to a greater level than what they started, not just as coaches, but also as people and I guess people and like practitioners, where they can go and present to people, they can go and speak to people and challenge practice and not feel embarrassed or scared to do so. And I think them sort of skills you don't get challenged with at external CPD unless you are putting your hand up in an auditorium and asking a question with 200 people listening to you or whatever. So I think it's a safe place to learn how to do that. And yeah, I just think it's a really nice way to do it if you can't access them external things. So we have the whole sports science and medical department will present 3 times a season. So it's 2 practitioners a month. And then we will have guest speakers come in as well. So we'll look for external speakers. Sometimes that's sorted out by the sporting director. So we've had people like Damien Hughes come in, and Middleton, people like that, who are completely different, come from a completely different background to us in a way, but they're all high performance people. So we get exposed to that. And sometimes it might be specific to us. So it might be a leader in research in blood flow restriction training, for example. It could be someone who's got a completely different skill set to us. So again, challenging practice in that way to try and enhance, whether it be the rehabilitation process or the way that we deal with athletes in the gym. So yeah, we've got a formal program because we felt that we had to have that, because if not, I just think the excuse of external CPD being harder to go to than for some people is not really acceptable. We must do what we can to help provide that.
No, definitely. And I don't want to take up any more of your time, mate, because I think there's been loads of great stuff in there. Some really applicable things that people can relate to their situations as well. So I really appreciate you sharing everything that we've gone through. I think we've pretty much got through everything that we said we wanted to. But I was just going to ask if people have got questions, they want to reach out to you. Is there anywhere that they can do that?
Yeah, so probably the best way would be you can either contact me via email, which I tend to answer emails pretty quick, or Twitter's probably the best place, which would be at Eastoe, so capital J, capital E. I thought if Eastoe-Smith, it would have been too long and too complicated for people, so it's just at Eastoe. And my email address is my full name, so jay.eastoe-smith hyphenated, that is, at canaries.co.uk, so you can contact me there as well.
That's awesome, mate. Hopefully we'll get some questions for you and people reaching out and getting a conversation going on some of the topics we've covered there. But I really appreciate you coming on, mate. I think that's been great. And like I say, some really interesting topics that we've covered there. So thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers, Jay.